Okay, good to go. Hey, Beady friends. Welcome to this Michael's jewelry making class. This is jewelry making, let's see, I gotta double check, 111. We are learning a lot in this whole journey of jewelry making that we have been on since this crazy world that we are living in started. I will introduce myself. My name is Meredith Roddy, and I work for a company called Beadalon, and we sell a lot of products through Michael's. And I am just so pleased to be here today to teach everybody how to make this project. So what are we making today? We are making an illusion bracelet with a little bit of a fancy twist. Once we kind of get settled and together, I will take the other camera and you can see it a little bit better. But back, I don't know, I think it was maybe our second or third class, we did a traditional illusion style necklace using a product called Supplemax. It's a monofilament illusion cord that Michael's carries, of course. And it was a great class, which reminds me to remind you that this is, I think, our 13th class now, which means that on the Michael's Community Classroom archive page on YouTube, also on the michaels.com, you can find all of the other classes that I have taught. And hopefully we have a group that's been following us maybe from the beginning. If we have some new people here as well, welcome. Keep in mind that this class is being recorded. So if there's something that you miss or something that I went a little too fast over, you had to run out of the room for a second, you can always come back and watch it on that archive page on Michael's as many times, forward, backwards, whichever way you need to get the project. So today for our illusion style necklace, it's going to be a make along project. We're going to make it along together. Sometimes I demonstrate something and it's kind of a long project, so you might not be able to make it along with me, but I think with a little bit of focus on my part, we'll be able to get through making the whole project today. And if not, I'm going to give you all of the skills that you need to go ahead and do it yourself. So Yvette has posted the PDF of the instructions. And so when you go through in the comments, you'll see it says Jewelry Making 111. It's a PDF document, and you can click on that. And then as I'm going along, actually Yvette will post each step as I'm going, so you'll be able to follow along with me as well. So I think that is all of the housekeeping, all of the information that I need to get out. Looks like we have a nice group here. So I think, Raina, if you're ready, we can go ahead and take that overhead camera and go ahead and get started. So and I definitely encourage you to ask questions, to post in the comments anything. I try to keep up, but like I mentioned, Yvette, who is also with Beadalon, is here to excuse me, to answer the questions, post links, and as I mentioned already, go ahead and put the steps in in the comments. Cindy just asked, will we see or hear Finn today? Finn is my dog. He is underneath my my desk right now, keeping my feet nice and toasty. So if history is any indication, we will definitely have a cameo from Finn today. Okay, so let's talk about the materials that we are going to need for our project. So I promised once we flip the camera, we would get a nice close up of what we are making today. Now, I mentioned that I believe it was our second or our third class, we made an illusion style design, but we used a clear cord for that. And here I thought we would kind of, even though I'm holding on to summer as long as I can, I decided to use a fall color palette and some satin gold beading wire. So one of the things that I talked about in our very, very first beading video or for Michael's was what all of the different numbers here on the label of the wire mean. So I definitely encourage you to go back and review that. But just to say, the diameter that I'm using today is a 0.018. The color is satin gold, and I'm using a 7-strand wire. And let's see, what else can I point out? So when I use the 7-strand wire, we recommend using a size 1 crimp tube, or today I'll be using a size 1 crimp bead. I always, if you participate in my classes, you know I mess these names up all the time. A size 1 crimp bead or a size 2 crimp tube. And this is what we're going to be using today, the size 2 crimp tube. Whether you use one or the other is often a matter of personal preference. I happen to prefer the tubes, but the beads work just as well. And I have been known to use a crimp bead as well. So this is what the color of this wire looks like. And it reminds me of fall. You know, it's this beautiful kind of satiny gold color, and it looks really nice with this whole big mix of beads that I have. Now this is a bead soup mix, and in the instructions that Yvette has posted there, I did my very best. I think that I included all of the part numbers and descriptions for the beads in my bead soup mix, but I'll dump this out just really quickly. You can see if you've participated in some other classes with me, you'll notice some of the beads from other classes that I've done. This is just leftovers, and one of the things that I love doing is using up my leftover beads in a project, and this is a perfect project for that. If you are new to beading, if you're a new beader, you'll hear the term stash buster or bead soup bandied around a lot. It's just kind of a catch-all of all of the beads that I have left over that I don't want to just go, you know, sit in little baggies or little storage containers. And you can see like this one I have knotted up. We all have a little container for beaders of bead soup. So this is my fall mix of bead soup. So some other things that we're going to need to make this project. I have here a couple of tubes of seed beads as well. I feel like these, I know these seed beads from John Bead. I feel like I've been using these for almost everything. This is my favorite apricot mix. If you take many of my classes, you'll know why there are only this many of these beads left. I've been using these for a lot of things. And then we need some findings, right? So here are my number 2 crimp tubes that I had mentioned. This is what we are going to be using to affix our wire to our connector bar. See, it all works together. This connector bar set actually comes with 2 sets of one of silver and one of gold. And I always like to just kind of show when I can the part numbers in case you are interested. And all of these are, of course, in the instructions. It looks like some people are having a challenge in getting to those instructions, but Yvette will be posting the step-by-step as I go along. So for a clasp, you could kind of use almost any clasp. I really like these hook and eye clasps for this style of bracelet. It's a minimalist clasp. It's easy to open and easy to attach. I don't know, it was just kind of something that spoke to me, and I liked how it looked. And then to attach that clasp, we will need a couple of jump rings right here. Okay, and I think did I touch on all the things? I think I got all of our materials. Now let's talk about our tools. So the tools that we're using for this project are kind of the tools that you should always have in your tool box. There's nothing fancy, nothing additional that you'll need today, but you'll need a nipper. This is the sparkle handle nipper, just a flush or semi-flush cutter. You'll hear it I'll refer to it as a nipper, a cutter, a semi-flush cutter, but basically this is what cuts the wire. You will need either a chain nose plier, or in the instructions I mentioned using a flat nose plier. Oftentimes these are interchangeable. just so for those of you who might not be as familiar, this is the flat nose plier here on the right. You can see it kind of has a duck bill almost, and then here are the chain nose pliers. So if you have the flat nose pliers, this is a great tool to use for this project, but if you have a chain nose, perfectly reasonable. And then of course we are going to need the crimping plier. This is a crimping heavy project. So we're going to be using our workhorse of the jewelry making world, the Beadalon crimping plier. We're going to use this no less than 10 times actually in this project. And those are the tools that you are going to need for the project. All right, I think we've gone over all of the things that we'll need. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we need to do to make this project is we are going to cut 5 strands of wire 10 inches long. And I am just moving things around on my computer really quickly so I can still see everybody's comments, but then also see my instructions. So I have already done that. I have cut my 5 strands of wire. These are 10 inches in length. Figure everybody knows how to cut wire by now. Got my measuring device, 10 inches, and I cut 5 of those. The next instruction is to lay out 5 series of beads. Now, if you're like me, you actually skip this step and do it as you go along. But I thought that, especially if you're a little bit new at this, it might be helpful to think about what our design, what our pattern is going to be. I find it challenging, and I would love to know in the comments if you agree with me. I find it challenging to do a random pattern. It is one of those things, I want things to be even. I don't like when things aren't symmetrical. And so a project like this really challenges me outside of my comfort zone. And sometimes I really like that. And so for me to do that, what I really need to do is just pick up the first bead that my fingers go to as I am beading. Otherwise, you can see it's kind of starting to look a little symmetrical here, right? But if you are more of a plan ahead kind of a gal or guy who's watching along, you can go ahead and lay your design out. See, I'm already doing too much of the same thing. Ooh, I like this bead here. This is where I always find beads that I forgot that I had, or it's kind of a fun little design element that maybe I didn't remember. Like this funky crackle bead, how did that get in there? I don't even know. Okay, so, and I see that we have some new beading friends as well as some old ones, and we are going to go over every single step of this whole project. So do not worry at all. By the end of this, you will have seen me crimp so many times, you are not even going to want to see it crimping again. I don't know. Okay, so I have 4 of my 5 laid out right now. And that's going to be good enough for me going forward. And this is really it's personal, you know, like some people really want to see an overview of the whole design before they even start. For me, when I'm making something like this, I want it to be more fluid, more organic, because if I overthink it, that's when things start getting I don't know, I feel like if I overthink it too much, it doesn't look as pretty. Is really kind of, for me, where I end up. Okay, so I already have 4 of my strands crimped on. We're going to do plenty of crimping today, not to worry. But this is the next step after we've laid out our beads, or maybe, you know, gone back and forth around and around on our design a couple of times. Now what we're going to do is we are going to start crimping our wires to our spacer bar. So I think we're down good and close. So I like to, and it really doesn't matter. It's just a secret between us friends where you start this, but I just, as a good habit, and you'll see when we get to the other end that it does matter, I start in the middle and then I do this one, then I do this one, then I do this one, and now I'm here on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show everybody how to crimp. And if you are brand new, welcome. I am so glad that you are here and that you wanted to make this design today. But I definitely encourage you to go back and watch the very first of all of the Michael's classes that I have done on Beadalon's behalf, because you will see there all of the tips and tricks and everything that you need to know about crimping and about wire and about choosing your crimps. Okay, so what I've done is I have taken one of our 10-inch pieces of wire, and again, I'm using this 0.018 satin gold 7-strand Beadalon bead stringing wire. Okay, so this is bead stringing wire. This isn't wire working wire. This is bead stringing wire, and that is what you use a crimp tube or crimp bead on. So I have my crimp tube strung up, and I'm just going to bring my camera down a little bit and see if we can get a little bit closer in all of this. Tube on my wire, and I'm going to thread that wire through the last hole, around, and back through that crimp tube. Okay, so up, around, and back through that crimp tube. And now I always want to keep a little bit of wiggle room here. This is a little too much wiggle room, but you don't want to tighten it up so far that there's no room here. That does a couple of different things. A, it puts too much tension on the wire, and B, in this particular case, it won't allow your wire to move freely around the finding here. So sometimes what you need to do, little pro tip, is come in here with your chain nose pliers and just kind of zhuzh it up, snug it down so it is the right amount. And I like to have about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And I apologize, when I get the camera so close to my hands, sometimes I hit it, and I try very hard not to do that, but I think it's better to get things as close as humanly possible. Okay, so crimping really quickly, since I have done a couple of tutorials on this already, there are 2 parts to the crimping plier. Let me put that down for just 1 second. We're going to go over this real quick. So there are 2 parts to the crimping plier. There is a front part. Doesn't help to get my thumb in there, does it? A front part and a back part. And the front part is fully round, and the back part has a little divot, a little jaw in there. And depending on, no, not depending on anything, what you want to do is you're going to use a 3-step approach. That's a 3-step approach to crimping. We're going to go in the front and the back, and then in the front again. Okay, so everyone stay with me. I promise it'll be worth it. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to come in here in the front jaw and round that crimp tube. And what I really mean is kind of turn it into an oval shape. And now I'm coming into that second jaw, that back jaw that has the little divot in it, and I'm pressing down so that my wire, one wire is on one side and one wire is on the other side of that tube now. Okay, and then the last step is back in the front. Back in the front, I'm just trying to get a really nice angle here for everybody to see what's going on. We've got some new people with us today. Back in the front, and I'm coming around, and one of the things that I find people do on this step is they tend to want to death grip it and then smush that crimp down as flat as possible. But see how I'm rotating my wrist around that crimp? That is what is going to give you a really nicely finished crimp design. So now I have all 5 of mine done, and I've already snipped the tails off of here. I'm going to snip that tail as well. And now if you want to take it one step to the next level, which I did not do with this project, but I did want to mention, if you would like to put crimp covers over these crimp beads, please feel free to do that. I would be more than happy to have you put crimp covers over those crimp tubes. Okay, so once again, I had mentioned in the beginning that I like to start and work from the, oops, I do not want to unmute myself. Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody. I got a little message up on my screen. I couldn't see what I was doing. I clicked the wrong button, so apologies. Okay, so I'm going to start from the center out, but each of these strands is going to be exactly the same. So I'm just going to move the other ones out of the way so we can really see what I'm doing. So let's move see. I like to kind of push the limits to see how close I can get. So first things first, we're going to put on another one of those crimp tubes. And in the space that we have, let's look back at our example. We have about 6 or so inches here. Let's count it exactly. It's about 6 or so, 6.5 inches to have our beads in our design without worrying about them being too close to the edge. So again, this is not an exact science. If we start overthinking it, then we start losing the organic feel of the design. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball, I don't know, a 1/2 inch, couple centimeters. And this is where I'm going to take my flat nose pliers. You could also take your chain nose pliers. And quick caveat before I do it. This is the only time that I will allow a flattening of the crimp. When you are using a crimp bead or a crimp tube as a structural holding the piece of jewelry together, you must use the crimping pliers. But when you are just using it as an opportunity to hold a bead into place, that is when I will allow a flattening of the crimp. It is bad practice for lots of different reasons that I will get into as we are going along, to flatten your crimps flat at the end. It breaks the wire, it damages the wire, it is bad all around. But when you are doing a design like this, you don't really need to crimp each one as you go along. You could, but you don't really need to, and so I'm not going to. And it goes a lot faster this way as well. So I'm just going to come in here. Again, I'm just eyeballing it, and I'm flattening that crimp with my flat nose pliers. Okay. I am not doing such a death grip here that it cuts through the wire. I am just squeezing hard enough that that crimp goes from an oval shape to a flat shape, and it is going to stay nice and put on that beading wire. So now I am going to pick up my first bead. And this is where, again, like you're going to see, I had laid them out there. It's all a mess right now, and that's fine with me. It is, like I said in the very beginning, easier for me to make a design that does not have a pattern if I don't make a pattern at the get-go. So here is my crimp tube flattened. Here is my first bead. Just bring that up nice and close so everybody can see what's going on. And now I'm going to put on, see it's still loose in there. I'm going to put on another crimp tube to hold that guy in place. So back here I have my little pile of crimp tubes, and I am going to, again, using my flat nose pliers, I'm going to come in here and just squeeze it in place. Okay, so if you have watched the other classes that I have done with knotting a let's see, I was knotting a lariat. It's kind of a similar technique that I did with the silk in that one, but instead of using knots in between our beads and using a measuring device to get our spaces even, we are using crimp tubes in between each of our beads, and we are just using our eyeballs to figure out the spacing. So now I have my bead in place, so crimp, bead, crimp, and now I need to make another station of crimp, bead, crimp, right? So we're going to start again with our crimp tube. We're just going to flatten that out, and I'm going to add another bead. So what I do like doing, there is a little bit of design method to my madness here. I do like kind of having smaller beads then larger beads, then smaller beads again, as I go from beginning to end of design. But this is such a forgiving design, and it looks so fun when you are wearing it that, again, you don't really have to worry about, is this bead, like the perfect bead for the perfect place? Because it probably is. I really feel like there are very few things that you can do to really mess this design up. All right, so now I'm going to make another crimp, bead, crimp, but this time I'm going to use my chain nose pliers because not everybody has a flat nose pliers. You should, but not everybody does. I love my flat nose pliers. I use it for all different kinds of things, but you can use a chain nose pliers just the exact same way. You just couldn't use, for example, a round nose plier. Let's see, I do have a round nose plier at the ready. So you wouldn't use a round nose pliers to do this. It would destroy that crimp. That would not be the tool for the job. And as my dad always said, you always want to make sure you use the right tools for the job. And just to show everybody again, the crimp tubes that I'm using are part of a set of 4. They come in 4 different colors, copper, silver, I believe gunmetal, and this gold color. It's a variety pack that Michaels does carry. And I love how they come in these little, these fun little tubes. It makes storage very, very easy. And then you have all the colors that you need right at the ready. So for this, I'm going to come in here and flatten it again. And you guys, you can kind of see the pattern now, right? We're just making little stations of each. Now I'm going to throw a curveball in for you for a moment now, because what I did in several places on this design is I actually have a loose bead in here. Can you see that loose bead? This guy is just hanging out, showing some movement, not doing anything but being pretty and sparkly. I have a couple of seed beads that are like that as well. I'm trying to look on my computer and do everything backwards. So there are a couple of beads in here that actually are loose. And I love adding just a little extra element of surprise movement in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my bead soup mix, and I'm going to see if I have a fun bead in here that I can do that with. And I think I'm going to use one of these rose gold round beads for a little shine. Okay. So that just he just hangs out. He doesn't get crimped in place on either side. He's just hanging out in between. And so now what I can do is I can go back and I can start that crimp, bead, crimp pattern again. So we're going to come in here. And as I'm going along with the next 2, it looks like everyone is paying rapt attention to my instructions. And there weren't too many questions that I had seen coming through. But as we are kind of into the repetitive part of our design right now, start thinking, I would love to take some time in our class today to answer any questions that you might have about jewelry making, about beading. I'm just taking out right now some of those sparkly beads. I wasn't seeing any in my bead soup, and I do like an extra sparkle. So if there are some techniques, some projects that either I've done already and you need a little kind of a next leveling on, or if there's something that you have really been burning to learn how to do, leave a little note in the comments and let me know what, if there's anything. I mean, we're always looking to think about, you know, what classes we want to offer going forward, and input from our beading friends is the best way to do that, right? Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right now. So I'm not going to do anything else with this strand at this particular moment. I'm going to move on to my next strand, because one of the things that we're going to do once we get all of our beads on is figure out sizing, right? Different people have different sized wrists. So if you're making this for yourself, you probably know what size wrist you have and what size bracelet you like for your wrist. So me, for example, I'm kind of a 6.5, 6 3/4 kind of a person. And I always say that wrist size is not necessarily indicative of person size. Different people like their jewelry to fit differently, right? Like I always say my mom likes her bracelets to be much looser than me. I like my bracelets to be much tighter on my wrist and fit me kind of up here, whereas she prefers them to kind of fit down here. So for you, you would know, you know, for yourself, what kind of fit you like best for your bracelet. And then that is what we'll do when we get to the other end, when we are measuring. And that's always a challenge for bracelets. I don't know if my jewelry makers who are watching today feel that that is a challenge as well, which is why I, more often than not, will make adjustable bracelets. And we have done a couple of classes already for Michaels on adjustable bracelets. But going forward, we also have a couple of classes for adjustable bracelets coming up. So that's always kind of my go-to when I'm not 100% sure about what size I want the bracelet to be. Because like I said, different people are different sizes and different people like their bracelets to fit differently. So, you know, maybe you decide that you're going to make all of your bracelets 7.5 inches. You're going to measure them out and all of your bracelets are 7.5 inches. But then what happens if, you know, you have somebody who has an 8-inch wrist or a 9-inch wrist or a 6-inch wrist? So that's why, I don't know, I tend to almost always make my bracelets adjustable. And you can do that with chain. You can do that with wire. You can do that with jump rings, lots and lots of different ways to do that. And as I am going along, anything, any comments, any thoughts, any suggestions that I might miss, Yvette, who is also from Beadalon, is going through and is going to help me remember going forward. If there's anything that I have forgotten that I should be touching on. Now, when I'm using this technique, something that I do want to point out is that my pliers are smooth on the inside. Sometimes if you've gotten your pliers from a hardware store or a very, very, very inexpensive starter kit. I'm just looking over here to see if in my supplies I happen to have any. If they have ridges on the inside, those really aren't jewelry pliers, I would definitely recommend using a jewelry grade plier, especially to do this, because what will end up happening is when you're doing your crimping, you're going to break all of your crimp tubes or crimp beads or crimp whatevers. So I definitely recommend making the investment in a set of smooth insided pliers. The ridges ones are great for when you're doing work around the house, in the garage, but not definitely not for jewelry making. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I've gone to the end, but what I really want to do is come to this one here. So let's check back in with what we're doing. So we've got, there we go, nice and close. We've got our middle strand done. Now we have one side here, and now I'm going to come to this side here. Okay, and we're just going to continue that random pattern of adding a crimp tube, crimping it, and adding a bead. And see here, I have offset this bead and this bead. I'm going to just try, and again, we're not doing any exact measurements here. I just want to make sure that this bead is not exactly lined up with any other bead, unless that's what you're going for, in which case you can line it up exactly. I said in the beginning, and I'll say it again, this is a project that has a lot of leeway for using up your bead soup. So again, I'm just adding as I see fit, and you can see I laid out that design in the beginning, but I'm not really adhering to my pattern at all. And that's what I need to do in order to create a random pattern. So here I'm just going to come in and I'm going to add a size 8 seed bead. I always like putting little sparkles, little shinies, little seed beads in between each of, or not each, but in between some, just to create a little bit of a visual interest. The thing about this project, again, is that when you're using your beading wire, and you're using a colored beading wire, everything becomes part of the design, right? So these gold crimp tubes become part of the design. I've got a little rose gold in here. I don't know if you can see that that is actually a rose gold bead. That was from a memory wire project that I did and it feels like a long time ago. It was really only a couple of weeks ago. I've been doing a lot of designing. It feels like a long time ago. But again, there's so many projects that we do, and so many ways that we can use up and not let our beads be lonely. They want to hang out with their friends. And now I have switched back to my flat nose pliers, just because I feel like they really do. They're a better workhorse for this design. Now, one of the things, yes, Yvette.
Real quick question. Do you want to just give a brief overview of why you're using 7-strand and explain the other varieties of Beadalon wire if somebody wanted to use a little bit more flexible wire for their designs?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I want to come back to that because I did see that somebody is asking if they crimp a bead or tube in place, can they remove it and move it later on? And that actually speaks to the wire very well. You can, I don't recommend it though, because what ends up happening is any crimping that you're doing is slightly damaging that wire, right? Because we're taking a piece of metal and we are, for all intents and purposes, smashing it against a piece of wire. So the wire underneath that crimp tube is not going to be as pretty as the wire that has not been smashed underneath that crimp tube. So something to keep in mind as you're going along. And that does not matter whether you're using 7-strand. See if I do have a 19-strand or a 49-strand. So I'm going to put these guys up here, and as I'm going along with my bracelet, it's a really good idea about, I'll talk a little bit about our different kinds of wire that we offer. So I'm using 7-strand for a couple of different reasons. The first and most practical of which is that I wanted to use the satin silver color, and I don't believe that it is available at Michael's in more than 7-strand. And so I say more than 7 strands. So what in the world does that mean? So with 7, 19, and 49 strand wire, what that refers to is the number of individual, I'm just looking to see if we have a picture of the 7-strand, of the number of individual wires that are twisted together and coated with nylon. So the more strands that you have, the softer and more supple and stronger the wire will be. So that's the first thing that you need to kind of consider when you're picking your bead stringing wire, is how many strands, 7, 19, or 49. So if you're using 49 strand, for example, that is going to be your strongest, your most drapey, your fanciest, your most expensive, and in my opinion, your prettiest wire. 19 strand is a good middle of the road wire to use. And then 7-strand is a really good place to start out. However, is using 49 strand for this project over 7-strand going to make a huge difference? Not really. So sometimes we use what we have available to us, right? Sometimes we use what we have in the color that we want to use. But I am using an 015 diameter so that it is thick enough and strong enough and hardy enough that it is going to survive well as a bracelet. If I were using a ton of really heavy beads and I were filling up this entire, all 5 of the strands the whole way with beads, I would bump up to a 19 or a 49 strand wire. But because this is such a light, airy design, and I actually like that it's a little bit stiffer and it's holding its shape a little bit more, the 7-strand is just fine. So that is a lot of if-then statements for which bead stringing wire to choose, but hopefully that made a little bit more, that made it a little bit more accessible. The other thing that you want to make sure of is, what is the other thing that you want to make sure of? I just lost my train of thought. Hold on. I don't remember. Oh, yes, I do remember. You want to make sure, and when you're doing a design, like I had mentioned, with all beads on the wire, the general rule is you want the wire to be thick enough that it fills the holes of your beads as much as possible. Okay, so now what does that mean? That means that if you are using, for example, let's see if I can find, here's a bead with a nice big hole. For this, you would want to use, and this is where this number comes in, that is an 015. So that is a very thin wire. I'm hoping this is an 024. Nope, this is an 018 also. This wire is a little bit thicker, but I would bump up. I'm just hoping that I have an 024 over here, and it looks like I do not. I apologize. But you're going to want to use a thicker wire on those great big holes of your beads, because what ends up happening is the wire is going to become, we say the word abraded. There's going to be a lot of abrasion on the inside, and insides of the beads will end up just cutting through the wire, especially if you're really rough on your jewelry. And what I recommend for that is to always use a 49 strand and then a 0.024. This number here would be 0.024, provided that fits in through your beads. I happen to not be very rough on my jewelry. So I'm lucky in that regard that I make a lot of things that, you know, since I have so much jewelry, I don't wear each individual piece very often, but I do want to make it so that it is durable and that it will last. All right, so we're coming down the home stretch here on our design. So I just want to kind of get this done, and then we will get the other side finished so that we can talk about measuring out our measuring and sizing, and then adding our clasp. So we have, and I'm pretty happy with how this is all coming together. Again, this is not a design of symmetry. This is not a design of exactitude. And, you know, maybe I'm going to add another one. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on it. You know, it doesn't have to be 5 on each. It could be 4 on each. Whatever it is that you, you know, whatever it is, this is a great, for me, it's a challenge, but it's also a great way to use up a lot of extra beads. And when we come back to the forward facing camera, remind me to point out so everybody can really look at the necklace that I'm wearing, because I actually used a bead soup of Swarovski crystals in my necklace. So we've, I feel like the term next level has been in my beading lexicon a lot recently, and the necklace that I'm wearing is definitely a next level bead soup kind of a necklace. But you know, we as beaders, we do a lot of different projects and we have a lot of beads. So maybe even if you don't have a bead soup, you make bead soup, and then you use that bead soup for designing with. It's always fun to try new things for sure. I'm wondering if anybody is beading along with me today. I did not ask that at the get-go, if anybody is beading along with me and if you're keeping up, because usually I do more of kind of a demonstration rather than let's bead along together. But I thought, you know, it's a quick enough project, and it gives me the opportunity to kind of look and see what people are, what you're interested in. You know, like there's so many things that I get jazzed about, but I love knowing what other people are excited about doing, what kind of techniques and different patterns and everything is kind of popular right now. And these two beads are way too big, so I'm just going to take them and put them to the side because they're getting in my way. They are getting in my way. You could also use smaller crimp tubes here. These are size 2 crimp tubes. You could use a size 1, which is a slightly smaller crimp tube. They tend to sometimes be a little hard to see, harder to string up, certainly, and harder to demonstrate with. I like, you'll see in many of my demonstrations, even if for a pattern I might use like a size 11 seed bead, I'll use a size 8 or a size 6 in my demonstration, just because it's much easier for you all to be able to see what I'm doing, right? I can get down pretty close, but then we always run the risk of me jostling that camera, or maybe coming out of focus a little bit. There we go. All right, so I think I've got all of my strands up so far, and I'm really liking how that is working. I mean, you really can't go wrong with this design. And I love once it's on how random and how beautiful it looks with that wire. So let's talk about sizing, shall we? So the easiest way to figure out the sizing of your bracelet is to take a bracelet that you already know is a good size and match it, right? So that is my easiest tip for sizing of a bracelet. I have a couple of kind of example bracelets that I mark all of my other bracelets against. So I already know that this bracelet, I like the size, and from spacer bar to spacer bar, it's 7 inches. Okay, everybody can see that? Spacer bar to spacer bar, it's 7 inches. I'm just gonna move some of my supplies off of my bead mat so that we can refocus on getting all this finished up. I'm still gonna need my crimp beads and my clasps, but we can take all of that off. Okay, so about 7 inches is where I want my spacer bar to spacer bar. And if you wanted to do this as a necklace, all you would do was cut longer pieces of wire. So I cut, these are 10 inches here. So cut yours 20 inches and do the exact same thing. But then figure out how long you want your necklace to be. So yeah, so for a necklace, you would count probably about 20 inches. So here, now what we need to do, and this is the tricky part. There's always one tricky part in every project. And this is the tricky part, is getting these wires to all be approximately the same size. They do not have to be exactly the same size. Let me say that one more time. They do not have to be exactly the same size. And you can see here, I'm trying to figure how I can show that. There we go. You can see these aren't necessarily all exactly the same size. But when it's on, it doesn't take away or add anything. So give yourself grace in not getting frustrated if you don't have everything exactly the right size. Now, the important question is, where did my other gold spacer bar go? It was right here, and I'm sure, oh, here it is. That would have been a disaster, but I kept it nice and safe and sound in the connector bar packet. So once again, these are that's the part number right there. You get 1 gold and 1 silver set, so 2 of each. And you want to double check also, just as a quick little warning, you can see one side has a beaded and one side is flat. You want to make sure that when you're crimping it to the same side. So whether it's beaded to beaded or flat to flat, you don't want to end up having the beaded, like, you know what I mean, like the little design side here and then the flat side here. That would be a major bummer. So we are going to set this down like that and set our spacer bar down like that. We're going to need some crimp tubes. And now we are actually going to go back to a traditional crimping technique, because we are doing a join that is structural. Right? We are doing the structure of our bracelet right now. So just like I started on the middle here, and I said it doesn't really matter kind of which way you go. For here, I think it does. And I will start, I'm going to move these 2 to the side, myself a little bit more space here, and these 2 to the side, and I'm going to start in the middle. So if I want, I'm trying to see how I can do this with showing you using my ruler effectively. I want this to be 7 inches. So I'm going to move this all down, and I'm going to start this at 7 inches and see that I need to crimp at about 7 inches. Now I made this last one a little long. So I'm going to be able to account for that by just making a 7.5 inch bracelet. But it's a good point for learning that you do want to be a little bit more careful than I was as I was going along and explaining everything, to make sure that you don't make these too long. I'm usually, I err on the other side. I usually make them too short. But today I made mine just a little bit too long. So we're going to make a slightly longer, or larger bracelet. So I'm going to take this out to 7.5 inches. So now I know working, let's see, let me move this just a little bit. We want everybody to be able to see. I'm not going to worry so much about it being pretty in the middle right now, because we really need to get that center one. And we want to make sure that we're taking the center one. So let's reposition everything. So I have 2 out to that side there, and then my 1 in the center and 2 out to this side here. So I was about to get everything all crossed up. Okay, so with that 10 inches, I do have a nice amount of space here. If you feel like you want a little bit more wiggle room or more space to work with, go ahead and cut yourself 12 inches. I mean, wire, one of the things that I always try to remind people is cut more wire than you think that you need. It's always better to have a little bit too much wire than to not have enough wire. Because trying to come back around and through here when you don't have enough wire that doesn't make anybody happy. Okay, so for anybody who missed my very first crimp in the very beginning, or who has not had the opportunity to watch the very first Beadalon bead stringing 101 video that I did for Michaels, we are going to talk about crimping. So I'm measuring out. I'm going to lift this up just a little bit so you can see what's going on the other side. So I have this set at the 7.5, and down here I'm pulling it so that it's right at the 7.5 again. And then I have my crimp tube right in place. Okay, so my wire is coming up, around, and through and back down that crimp tube. Okay, let me hold that in place and you can see back down the crimp tube the other way. One of the things that is so frustrating for me is when I do Facebook Lives, I can go back and read all of the comments after everything, but with the Zoom, the way that we do it, I can't go back and see the comments afterwards. So I try to read and do both at the same time. So if I do miss some things, I do apologize, but there's some very kind things coming in, and I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm here in the front, and I'm just gently pressing down to turn my crimp tube into an oval, and it won't stay in place during that step, and that's okay. You don't really need it to. Now I'm coming into the back and I'm squeezing down, and you can see I have left a little bit of a loop of wiggle room up at the top. It's maybe a little smaller than I want it to be, but it's no big deal. And now I'm going to come back here in the front, and I am going to compress down. And I'm going to do that 4 more times. And I'm going to talk everybody through it so that we're getting out of here with a good crimping knowledge. And then I'm going to come in here with my nipper and snip the wire off. Okay, I'm going to bring this back down now so that we can see. So for my beading workspace, what I have found, especially with the all of the different projects that I've been working on recently, is these cookie sheets that I'm working on. I actually got at Target, and I'm using Beadalon magnetic clasps to hold them down, but you can use any kind of strong magnet to do that. And that way I can keep everything stacked up, and then very quickly switch out projects. So for example, tomorrow I have a whole different project that I am going to be working on, or actually right after this class, I have a whole different project that I'm going to be working on. So I can take all this, I can move it off of my workspace and then move it back on, or move another one back on and work on that. And if I need to come back to this, I can. Okay, so here we are. I just put on another crimp tube. Let's try to, we're going to do this from the super close angle, right? So we've got our crimp tube on, and now what I'm doing is I'm taking the next one over, and actually, you know what I'm going to do just for everybody's, to make it easier for everybody, I'm going to stay consistent. It's one of the hardest things when you're trying to teach is keep everything consistent, because when we're beading, right, we move things around and we look at things from all different angles. But when you're explaining something to somebody, it becomes much, much easier for them to understand if you're doing it all from the same side. So let's do that from the same side again. So I have my one connected here and all of my 5 connected here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the next one out. So these 2 and then these 2 are going to be the ones that I crimp on last. So we're going to take this one and follow those very same steps. Put on our crimp tube, come here, take my wire over, around, and through, and pull it up tight. And this is where, remember I was saying there's a little bit of a tricky part, right? I find that if I leave it down on my bead mat and tighten it up against the middle one, that's why I always do the middle one first, right? Because I'm tightening this one up against the middle one, and then I'm tightening the next one up against the middle one and moving toward the outside. Otherwise, you can end up getting it'll be kind of wonky as you go along. if you can picture that in your head, if you're starting on one side, it might not end up quite as evenly as you had hoped. So do as I say, not as I do, because I am going to lift this up so that everybody can see what I'm doing to crimp with. But I find that it is easier to get these 2 even if you kind of work down here on the workspace. But I'm not as worried about that. So I'm going to come up here and show everybody really close that little bit of wiggle room that I have built in. It's kind of a 1/2 inch between 1/4 of an inch. I'm sorry, not a 1/2 inch, 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And the technique that you use, if I were using crimp beads, if I were like, I would rather use crimp beads for this project instead of crimp tubes, same deal, same crimping. So you come in the front, then you go in the back. Well, that's a kind of an interesting angle to see that. And then back to the front, coming straight up and down. Trying to get my clasp out of the way. There we go. And again, I'm not death gripping this, and I'm moving my tool around and around so that you can get a nice hold on that crimp. You don't want to smash the wire so much, because what ends up happening, especially if you come in here and try to smash it down in the tip. Hold on, let me see. There we go. Don't do that. It's so tempting. We've all been there, been tempted to kind of give it an extra little zhuzh at the end. All that's going to do is break that wire. We talk a lot at Beadalon about wire. We talk a lot about wire because that's what we do. We manufacture the wire, we make the wire. But we take the time to be very specific about teaching how to do it the right way so that everybody can make professional jewelry, right? That's what we want to do. We want to make jewelry, whether we're selling it, whether we're gifting it, whether we're making it ourselves. You want it to be professional, right? You want it to last the test of time. Now we're using don't want to say the simplest techniques for this, but there are a couple ways that you can next level this project, right? And I went over many of those ways again in that Beading 101 video, and I'm just going to do these next 2 crimps kind of up to speed before we get to to the end. But you could use wire guardians here. You could use crimp covers. You could use different kinds of ends, right? You can use, gosh, I'm trying to think of all the different ways that you could next level this. You can use crimp covers on all of these beads, right? If you found some really cool decorative crimp covers. And you can see I'm always laying it back down before I do any crimping, just to make sure that I don't crimp like this. But you know what? If you did crimp like that and it was crossed or twisted, that I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that, I too am okay with that. You see how I came back over and I'm working on this side now? Again, it's one of those designs that it's so, like, once you get the technique, there's so many different variations that you could do it. I use a very kind of monochromatic color palette with these very fall-like colors. And you can see this one I did, and it's way, way, way too long, right? So I could do a couple of different things here. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it and pretend like it's right, but I'll go back and actually just redo that whole strand. I just made it too long, right? So no big deal. It took me, what, 5 minutes to get the whole thing from start to finish. So in the interest of time for our class, I'm just going to go ahead and crimp it. But if one of your strands is too long, just go ahead and go back and redo it, you know? Or if one of your beads, you're like, ooh, that is not the right color at all for my design, just redo it. You know, it's no big thing. One of my biggest challenges in beading is being able to take something apart. I don't know if that's something that people in the group have a challenge with as well. But I always have struggled with taking things apart. I have half finished projects and broken pieces of jewelry all over my studio. And it's okay to take it apart. Give yourself permission to do that. All right, so one last time for the crimping. So this is kind of like the grand finale of crimping before we add our clasp. So we're going to start right in the front of those pliers, make a nice oval shape. We're going to come back to the back of the pliers and we're going to compress. And I have my wire so that one side of the wire is on one side of the tube and one side of the wire is on the other side of the tube, that we're not, they're not crossed in that tube. And then I'm going to come here and up, straight up and down. This is always the one that's the hardest to show nicely in the camera, especially with that spacer bar in the way. But straight up and down, got to actually get it straight up and down. There we go. And a nice compression. And then kind of around and around and around. No death grips, no breaking off of the wire. And I would just start over again at the very beginning with this one, because it's not like it's too long here, but it's too short here. So I would cut from here and cut from here and just start the whole thing over again. It's just, I mean, if you go, you know, inch for inch, dollar for dollar or whatever, the price of a little bit of wire is, you know, maybe 5 cents. I don't know, probably not even that much. And, you know, maybe if I went like that, it might not even matter that it's that long, but that happens for sure. Okay, so we have to add our clasp, right? We're coming to the grand almost done. So like I said, I'm just using these S-hook clasps. There's like, it kind of looks like a figure 8. Let's come nice and close. I'll pull that up to the camera in a second so everyone can see. And then a little hook here. So here's my hook. Here's my, it just looks like an 8, right? Or an infinity. And this guy just comes in just like so. Okay. And I'm going to use a jump ring to attach one side and then the other side to my spacer bar, right? And I love these spacer bars. I feel like there's so many more things that we could do with them. So to do this, we are going to need 2 pliers. So I've been using my chain nose pliers and my flat nose pliers, but you can use 2 chain nose, 2 flat nose. Just don't do this with a round nose plier unless you're in a super pinch. I don't recommend it. Okay, so the proper way to open and close a jump ring, I'm going to hold it flat on one side and then twist it toward me. So you don't want to pull it apart. You just want to gently twist it toward yourself. Then I'm going to pick up my spacer bar here. I'm going to pick up my clasp here and then reverse that opening motion. So I'm just going to very gently, oops, and then my pliers are going to slip out of place. Okay, let's try that one more time. Oh, I love that nice close-up shot. It makes me so happy. I actually just kind of wiggle them back and forth until there's no space in between my jump rings. Okay, so now we have to do the second side. So same thing. We're going to grab our jump ring. We are going to open up that jump ring just by twisting one way one side, one way the other side. Hook this in here. And if this kind of clasp isn't your bag, or if you want to make this into an adjustable bracelet, you can certainly use a little piece of chain. You could actually use a little piece of chain with this hook. And then that allows the person that you're making it for to make it bigger or smaller. And actually, if I just do a little twisty twist there, no one is ever going to know that one strand is a little bit longer than all the others. And there we go. All right. Oh my gosh, so fun. Let's see, how did we do with getting it pretty close to the original, right? A little different. I use kind of maybe lighter beads, but I really am very enthusiastic about how this bracelet turned out. And I'm glad that we were able to kind of do it in real time and hang out together for a little while this afternoon. I hope that making a nice beading project brought you some much needed joy and relaxation in your day. And yeah, I think we did great. Awesome. All right, Raina, if you want, I think that you can pull that front facing camera up again. We can all breathe a great sigh of relief. That was a lot. That was a good project, but we got to practice crimping. We talked about design. We learned a little bit about our different kinds of wire. And I'm gonna model my bracelet for a second. I probably should have done that before we came to the upwards camera, but I'm so excited about it. A little hard for me to put on myself. And of course I did take my glasses off. So we're just gonna model it like that. But it's so fun. And as promised, I did want to show everybody, this is the same exact technique that I used for the bracelet that we made today. But instead of using a bead soup of kind of more organic agates and different kinds of beads, I actually used a whole slew of Swarovski crystals. So it just gives it a little bit of a different vibe, right? And I also use thicker wire on this, but still a beautiful fall inspiration project. So thank you everybody. Oh my gosh, so much for joining me and sticking with me for this class. We will be back next week and Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And if you are watching very carefully, you just saw Finn make his cameo walking behind me. So anybody who was waiting for Finn, yeah, good one, Cindy. That's great. I love it. It's like a Where's Waldo, but instead it's Where's Finn. Thank you, Michaels. I always love to, I always feel obliged and privileged to be able to thank Michaels for giving me and Beadalon the opportunity to participate. If you do make this project, post it on Facebook, on Instagram, on all the socials. Use the hashtag make it with Michaels and make it with Beadalon, so we can see what you make up. And look, that was already posted right there. So hopefully I got a chance to address as many things as possible. And I think that that is it for me. Thanks everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Be safe, be well, and until next time, happy beading.